Hi, I'm Lillian. Welcome back to my channel Ink and Pages. Today I'm going to be doing the end of the year book tag. So question one is, are there any books you started this year that you still need to finish? So I am currently reading two, which I will show you. I started these both last week when I was on holiday in France. First of all, I am reading Babel by R.F. Kuang. I'm really enjoying this. I'm about 2/3 of the way through. I'm really liking how this is kind of all about language and translation. Those are major themes, and I love learning languages and I love reading books about languages, so this is really, really interesting. And it's also a lot about imperialism and colonialism and how those worlds interact in this sort of, it's I guess an alternative history. Like there's some fantasy elements. This is set in the 1830s at Oxford University, and I'm having a really good time. And I think I've just got to the point where things are about to get very fast paced, and I think it's going to be maybe very, very crazy for like the last section of the book, but I'm having a really good time. I'm finding it a little bit harder to read just being back at home, because when you're on holiday you don't have anything else to do, and so I was just found it really easy to pick up and read this, and so I'm slightly having to force myself to continue with it, but not because I'm having a bad time, because I'm really not. The other book I'm currently reading is a non-fiction one called Unruly by David Mitchell, not the fiction novelist who wrote The Bone Clocks and Cloud Atlas, the comedian David Mitchell. And yeah, this is all about the kings and queens of England. I'm not very far in. I have a bookmark somewhere. There we go. I'm on page 72, which is the chapter on King Ethelred the Unready. So we haven't even got to, the Norman invasion yet. We're not even at 1066. And I'm also having a good time with this. It's slightly slower going because it is non-fiction. So like I'm learning things and it's important to pay attention to every word, and you can't like get the vibe and move on. Everything is always relevant, but it is very, very interesting, and it is, as you would hope, written in quite a funny way, and there are lots of silly moments that are kind of making me laugh, and I'll like send a picture to my dad or a friend with like a section on, because that quote was particularly funny. So those are the two books that I'm actively reading at the moment. I also have two which are kind of on hold because I've slightly lost interest. So first of all, I have yet still to finish On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong, which I started reading on my Easter holiday, so all the way back in April, and I still haven't finished it. I am pretty close to the end, and it's not even a very long book. I've got maybe like 25-30% left to go. And at this point, because it's been so long since I picked it up, I'm really genuinely considering just starting from the beginning again, because it was a quick read and it was interesting. I thought it was going to be an autobiography, but it's not. But I think it's heavily inspired by the author's own life. So this is about a young boy who I think is Vietnamese family, and it's about him and his mum or something like that, and it's written kind of in second person to his mother, and they have a very not great relationship, and she's quite abusive in many ways, and I don't know how it's going to end. I never know what's about to happen next, which makes it interesting, but also I have forgotten almost everything that happened at the start. And then the other book which I've kind of put on hold is this tiny little one called The Celts, A Very Short Introduction by Barry Cunliffe. I'm even like, what, 30 pages in? I'm 32 pages in, and it's obviously like a non-fiction introductory book about the Celts. And I had to put it down because I was getting a bit annoyed because I was finding it repetitive, and I was like, I'm only 32 pages in. How is he already repeating himself? And so I just remember feeling irritated by that, and I put this down months ago and haven't touched it since. The other book I guess I'm technically reading, but you heard it here first, breaking news, I'm DNFing it, is The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake, which I started listening to the audiobook of on Spotify when I was in like a bit of a reading slump earlier this year, a couple of months ago. And I actively chose something that I didn't think I was going to enjoy, which isn't normally like me. But I chose this because I knew it was popular, and I was hoping that it would be like a kind of easy, not very good or engaging read, to be honest. I chose it hoping that it would be kind of like a fast food equivalent of a book that I could just easily read and like get something from, a little bit of enjoyment, but that would then allow me to like get back into the swing of reading and pick up something that I was a lot more interested in, or that I would be a lot more engaged in afterwards. It didn't really work because I almost immediately didn't like this book. I probably have only listened to the equivalent of the first 30 or 40 pages or something like that, but the very first chapter was all about these two characters who I found absolutely insufferable and who I knew were going to get even more insufferable because they were definitely going to fall in love later in the book. Like, I could just tell. I don't need to read this book to know that those two are going to end up like being a couple, and I hated them. And then I read a couple more chapters or listened to a couple more chapters and didn't really like anyone else. And then I got to the point where I was like, I actually don't have to listen to this. I am forcing myself to listen to this thing that I really don't want to. I can just pick up a different book. So in the end, I ended up rereading A Court of Mist and Fury, and that did get me out of my reading slump, and I like had a much better time with it. So yeah, so I'm no longer finishing the Atlas Six. I don't care anything about it. I'm not even gonna like go online and read spoilers for the end because I quite literally do not care what happens to these people. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry at the same time. Question 2 of this tag is, do I have an autumnal book to transition into autumn with? I guess Babel counts for this. It is set at the University of Oxford, so it's like academic. So that matches to the school year having just started this month. And also it's like dark academia, I think, as well. So that matches thematically the, you know, longer autumn nights and the colder weather we're going to be getting. So I think that works quite well. Question 3 is there a new release that you're still waiting for? I mean, not really. I'm really not on it with new releases. I made a spread in my reading journal for anticipated releases of this year, and I've put 6 books on it because I'm really, really picky. So all of these books are ones that either like genuinely sounded really interesting to me and I would like to pick up, or I just buy authors I've read from before and really enjoyed. So looking at these now, I think the one I'm probably most interested in reading is Green Teeth by Molly O'Neill. I think this is like a folk tale inspired book about the myth of Jenny Greenteeth, who is this folklore creature who lives in a pond and I think like drags people in and eats them. So that sounds really interesting to me because I'm really into mythology and folklore and all that kind of stuff. The other books on here, I mean, there's a couple of series which I'd like to continue. So there's the new Shauna Maguire book, Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear, which came out in January. And that is part of the Wayward Children series, which I've read the first, 5 or 6 books from, I can't remember. This one, Adrift in Currents Clean and Clear, I think is like book 9 or 10, so I still have quite a lot to catch up on. And then next month, actually, Nevo's book, A Mouthful of Dust, comes out, which is, I think, the 5th or 6th in the Singing Hills cycle series, of which I have read the first 3. I want to say I've read 3, and I have the 4th book on my TBR. So yeah, that's kind of it. Like, I'm really not up on anticipated releases. I would happily go without reading any of these for many years. Yeah, that's my answer for that question. Question 4 is, what are 3 books that I would like to read by the end of the year? I actually just read Arcadia by Ian Pearce, which was the longest standing, I think, book on my TBR, or like one of the books I'd owned the longest. And because it was probably the biggest, it was the most intimidating book on my TBR for ages. So now, having finally read it, I feel so full of myself. I feel so cocky and confident, and I'm feeling great that I finally read it. The other book, which I kind of feel similarly about, is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch, which I think I've also owned for maybe a decade and haven't read. So I think if I could read that book by the end of this year, it would just kick up my smugness into overdrive, and I would be so pleased with myself. And so yeah, I'm going to say that one. I think another book I'd like to read, okay, so one of my newer purchases, which I only just got last month for holiday, and then I didn't end up reading it, was The Last Murder at the End of the World by Stuart Turton. This is his 3rd book. I have read his other 2. The first book of his was the 7 and a half deaths, or 7 deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which was like a murder mystery with a sci-fi twist, which I ended up being disappointed by, and I didn't think it was as clever as it wanted to be, and I just didn't really have a good time with it. I found it quite frustrating when I read it. But then I gave him a second chance, and I read his 2nd book, which is, oh god, what's it called? The Devil and the Dark Water. And I really liked it. Like, I was really pleasantly surprised. It was a murder mystery, this time with a like it was a historical fiction murder mystery with a potential twist of like, were there fantasy elements or was it not? And I'm not going to say whether it was or not, but I really, really liked it. I think I borrowed it from the library and I read it as an ebook, and then ended up loving it so much that I did buy the physical copy, and it's now on my shelf. So I'm giving him a third chance, and I'm really hoping this one is another murder mystery with a sci-fi twist. So I'm hoping I will enjoy it as much as his second book, even though it probably reminds me more of his first book. We will see. But yeah, I'd really, really love to read that sometime soon. And then finally, I mean, maybe this is a cop-out because it's like seven books, not just another one, but I'd like to reread the monstrous graphic novel series by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. I have the 7th, I think, volume on my TBR, and I think a new volume comes out each year around autumn, and what I have liked to do historically is reread the entire series up until that point and then read the new volume. So I've read the first volume of Monstrous actually so many times, and I love that book. I think it's great. It's the 5-star favorite for me now, that opening volume. So I know that one really well, and like volume 2 I have a pretty good grasp on, and 3 and 4 I think I can kind of remember, but actually like volume 5, volume 6, I genuinely cannot remember what happens in them. So I definitely need to reread, I think, all of that series, and then finally read volume 7, which is sitting on my TBR in my bedroom. Question 5 is there a book you think could still shock you and become a favorite of the year? I mean, ideally, yes. Despite what I said earlier about the Atlas 6, I do normally tend to read books that I think I will enjoy. So honestly, all of the books on my TBR have the potential to be my favorite. I think the one I think is most likely to end up being a favorite is probably like 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes, I think. This is a retelling of, I think, the Trojan War. So I'm really interested in mythology, and like obviously Greek mythology is a large part of that. And I think that could not really surprise me, but I think that could end up being a favorite if I actually do get to it by the end of this year. Of all the books I own, maybe that would be least likely. I mean, I might just say Dark Matter, actually, again, by Blake Crouch. Maybe because I've just owned it for so long, I'm less likely to enjoy it because my taste has changed since I was first interested in it, literally a decade ago. I mean, it might be that. And finally, question 6 is, have I already started making reading plans for next year? It's a no from me. I could not stick to a TBR if my life depended on it. Once I finish Babel and once I finish Unruly, like, I don't even know what I'll be in the mood for. I just said, oh, I'm really interested in The Last Murder at the End of the World. I could, in 3 days, try and pick up that book and read it and be not interested, and it could go on my TBR shelf for a decade. It has happened before. But despite that, complete non-answer to the final question of this tag. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in my next one.